Mr. President, this is Richard Peter here in Dallas, Texas. My telephone number is 1-877-365-0042. Well, Mr. President, I'm sure you've gotten the bad news by now that Timothy Geithner gave a very general speech about his solution for the economy. The stock market plummeted another 200 or 300 points after they heard this speech. Mr. President, the people in this country are not stupid. We want specifics. The big problem with the credit situation are the toxic assets, Mr. President. Nobody wants to buy something. I don't care if you encourage us by giving us all kinds of money as bankers to go, or as private investors, I'm sorry, to go out and buy toxic assets. We're not going to buy anything poisonous. Would you take your girls out to shop for poisonous snakes and then give them money to buy it? Absolutely not. You would, Mr. President. It doesn't make sense. And Geithner did not propose what to do with the toxic assets. Now, later on in my briefing to you today, I'm going to describe what can be done, Mr. President. But let me share with you a story that I think will help you see the way we, the people, are thinking. When I was a young man, I took art, and I had a very fine art teacher, and I had a painting that I was working on. I had a vision for it, but it just wasn't right. The colors weren't right. The texture wasn't right. It just didn't look right. And I spent weeks and weeks and weeks trying to fix it up. My teacher finally came over to me. She said, "Richard, would you mind if I did you a big favor?" And I said, "What is it that you'd like to do, ma'am?" She took my picture and she tore it up right in front of me, okay? And she said, and put a new canvas up on the easel and said, "Do a new picture, Richard. You cannot reform something that, you cannot change something that's not right to begin with." And I did a new picture, and I was reasonably satisfied with it. Now, Mr. President, let me tell you, the American banking system is a failed picture. You can daub it here, you can tweak it there, you can do all that you want to with it, but Mr. President, it is a complete, utter, and absolute failure. Toxic assets, bad bank. The banks have taken billions and trillions of dollars in interest from the American people, and the best they can do is to come back to us and ask for our taxpayer dollars to make up for their stupidity. Mr. President, you are a fair man. You are a good man, Mr. President. What we need to do right now is abolish the banking system that we now have. I'm not saying nationalize the banks, but here's what I'd like you to do, Mr. President. Call Tim Geithner into your office and say, "Hey, Mr. Secretary, you work for me now. You don't work for the Federal Reserve anymore. Your obligation is not to the banking system and the fractional reserve system, which is unfair. See my earlier videos on this, Mr. President. Your obligation is to me, the President of the United States, and the people that we serve. I hired you, Mr. Geithner. Now I'm going to give you my idea and my plan. I want to take the ugly picture off the easel of the American banking system. I don't want to nationalize the bank, but I want you to create a perfect bank. A perfect bank, Mr. Geithner. Now, your homework today for the planes that I let you fly around in and the prestige I've given to you as being the new Secretary of State of the United States is I want you to think outside the box, Mr. Geithner. And I'm going to give you 7 days because I'm in a hurry to get this done, okay? What I want you to do is to create a new national bank. And by the way, I don't want to use the old Treasury notes. I want them to be United States dollars. And I want those Treasury notes retired. I've already given the specifics of how to do that, Mr. President. So, Geithner, here's what I want you to do. If you want to keep your job and your prestige and be able to fly all over the world representing me, remember, you represent me. I'm the President of the United States. I want you to think outside the box. And I want you to create a new national bank funded with United States currency. Do you understand me? Then the loans I want you to start making should be model loans. You should never, ever have somebody buy a $100,000 home and have to pay $200,000 in interest up front. So part of a perfect national bank would be not only to get rid of the Federal Reserve notes and get rid of fractional banking, but to make a model loan, which every payment, if it's a $1,000 payment, $500 goes to interest and $500 goes to principal. Now that would be the kind of bank I want, Mr. Geithner, but that's just one of the ideas that I have as your president. You come up with some new ideas that are the perfect bank. Make me a perfect bank. And make it a national bank. Don't nationalize the other banks. Just make me a perfect bank. Let them continue to do business. provided they do business in the United States currency that I'm talking about. That we're not going to allow them to do. No more fractional banking, no more use of Federal Reserve notes, Mr. President. There are other things that you're going to put in this perfect bank. I want to see what you and your people can come up with. And if it's written in fourth grade English and I can understand it and I can agree to it and I can show it to the American people and explain it to them, and if it comes to their heart as being fair, right, and just, then it'll go into my new national bank. Funded by United States currency, not United States notes. The other banks can continue to exist, but they are not going to be allowed to use Treasury notes. Mr. President, we are sovereign citizens of the United States of America. We don't want to carry around notes, instruments of debt in our pockets. We are a sovereign nation. We own the blood of any nation is its currency. We don't want our blood lent to us at interest by banks, foreign or domestic. Do you understand that, Mr. President? The borrower is a servant to the lender. When you put United States notes in our pocket, you're making us servants of the banks. The banks are there to serve us. The government is there to serve us. God created us in his image and his likeness. We created governments to serve us in our pursuit of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, Mr. President. All right, now here's what you're going to do with the toxic assets, Mr. President. We're not going to take our precious tax dollars and make up for the stupidity of the American banks. We don't buy toxic assets. Would you take your beautiful little daughter, Sasha and Malia, into a snake store and then give money out of your wallet, Treasury notes, Mr. President, notes, Federal Reserve notes, and buy them a snake? We don't want toxic assets. The hell with it. Okay, here's what we want you to do. When you set up that national bank funded with new United States currency, Mr. President, here's what we want you to do. We want you to announce to the other banks that haven't adopted model regulations that follow along Tim Geithner's perfect bank that he's going to design with you and with the American people, first of all, in mind. And he's going to make an offer. If you would like a charter from us and you would like our imprimatur, our signature of approval, then you will turn over all toxic assets to us at 10 cents on the dollar. Yeah, I'll even buy a snake, Mr. President, at 10 cents on the dollar. But they're going to come hat in hand and begging my forgiveness and begging me to take over those poisonous snakes. And when I get them in my bank at 10 cents on the dollar, I want you to design a team to clean them up and to reform them, change the instruments. If somebody's lost their home and they're still alive and well somewhere and you feel like they can come back and into their old homes and it's still vacant, give them priority to get back into their old homes and redesign that mortgage with this in mind. A 30-year mortgage. Since we're in a national emergency, the interest rate should be no higher than 4%, and every payment, half of it should go to interest and half of it should go to principal. Now, what if those outside banks don't want to come in, Mr. President, and sell their toxic assets to us at 10 cents on the dollar, because that's all we're going to pay for a poisonous snake that has bit us all in the jugular vein and nearly killed us? We're not going to pay our enemies and make them even more prosperous, Mr. President. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Okay? So that's what we're going to do with these toxic assets. We're going to let them come to us hat in hand and beg us to buy them off at 10 cents on the dollar. Then we're going to redesign them the way the God who raised Jesus Christ from the dead would have designed them, in fairness, in justice, in equity. That's what we're going to do with the toxic assets. Now, what about those banks that will not sell us those notes, those toxic assets at 10 cents on the dollar? Then let them die. Let them die. They made mistakes. Their stockholders made mistakes. Their bondholders made mistakes. Let them die and line up in the unemployment line, Mr. President, the way millions of ordinary Americans who live decent lives are having to do in these troubled times. Now, that's the answer, Mr. President. Now, don't nationalize the banks. Get us our currency back. Get us away from Treasury notes. Forbid fractional reserve banking. Set up a national and perfect bank that the world will be proud of, and have Tim Geithner do it. If he can't, fire him and hire me. I know what a good bank would look like. And then the other banks will imitate, Mr. President, and follow the new national bank of the United States of America. Thank you, Mr. President. If you'd like to call me, pick up the phone and do that, sir. My phone number is 1-877-365-0042. God bless you, Mr. President, but most of all, God bless the people of the United States of America.